Okay. I was working with a student online the other day, and we got to x plus 9 quantity squared. I asked him to simplify it. He looked at the whiteboard for about 3 seconds and said, x squared plus 9 squared. Not I think, not maybe. No. This man said it with such confidence, like somebody who had already started grading my paper. I said, walk me through it. Okay. He pointed at the exponent and he said, the 2 goes to everything. I said, everything? He said, yeah. I said, okay. Then I wrote on the whiteboard, 2 plus 3 quantity squared. Okay. He said, what's that got to do with it? I said, humor me. Just humor me. He looked at it and said, 25. I said, cool. Very good. Then I said, using your rule, what would it be? He looked at the whiteboard. Then he said, 2 squared plus 3 squared. I said, and what's that? He said, 4 plus 9. And I said, which is? He said, 13. I said, okay. Now he's staring at the whiteboard because 25 and 13 got a pretty significant disagreement happening on the screen. I mean, neither one of them looked interested in compromising. He said, hold up. I said, exactly. Now his cursor started moving across the board. That's how I know the lesson just got started. Because when students stop defending the answer and start investigating, that's when the real learning happens. He said, well, why did it work differently? I said, because squaring a sum and squaring each part aren't the same thing. He said, but the 2 goes with everything. I said, not the way you think. Okay. He wasn't convinced. So I asked him, if I tell you to square a whole pizza, what you gonna do? He said, what does that even mean? Square a pizza. I said, exactly. You don't square slices. You square the whole thing. Now he's laughing. I don't see nothing funny. But he's thinking. Then I wrote on the board, x plus 9 times x plus 9. I said, that's what the square actually means. His cursor starts moving again. I see x times x times 9. I see 9 times x, 9 times 9. Then he got x squared plus 18x plus 81. And immediately stopped. And he leaned a little closer. He said, wait, where did the 18x come from? He looked at the other answer he had got, x squared plus 9 squared. And he looked back at his new answer. And I said, from the 2 terms you forgot existed. Okay? He looked back at the original. So my answer was missing a whole piece. I said, not just a piece, the entire middle of the sandwich. Then he said, okay, I see now. If I square the whole expression, I got to account for everything interacting with everything. Okay, point taken. And I said, bingo, because that's what students miss. The square isn't attacking individual terms, the square is attached to the entire expression. And if you ignore that, algebra will let you get only halfway through the problem before reminding you that parentheses do matter. Okay. By the end of the session, he looked at x plus 9 now. He said, oh, yeah, it's just x plus 9. X plus 9 squared is just x plus 9 times x plus 9. wearing a disguise. I said, now you speaking algebra. Mm-hmm.